start streaming. Okay, we are going live. And it looks like we're up and streaming.
Okay. Call the meeting to order at 9:04. Adoption of the agenda. Is there any additions or anybody else?
It could go under maybe the blue sky, but it has to, there's two things actually about, one is budget, and the other one is assessment list. So budget, just a question, something that was brought up, and when I was going through our old minutes, I thought we have never answered it. So can I put those things on the agenda, or do you want them somewhere else?
Maybe just blue sky is good.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so we're adding,
One is just budget,
okay,
budget comparison. The second one is assessment list.
okay, no worries. We'll add those as items. I think it would be G and H, but, okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Tricia?
Mine's just on page 4, it's just a typo. Under recommendation that the agenda for the February 15th, 2021 should read 2022.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And that is on page
4.
right there, under recommendations. Okay. Thank you
Okay.
very
Can I
much.
get a motion to accept the agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda as corrected.
Okay. Any discussion on it? Call the question. All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, next is adoption of the minutes. Anybody see any errors or omissions?
I do believe I have something, just one quick second here. Nope, we're good to go.
Sorry. Any discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Didn't make a motion.
Who made the motion?
Bruce, yeah.
I'll make.
Nobody made a motion.
That's right.
I'll make a motion to
Okay.
adopt the minutes.
So that was Peter for the adoption of the minutes and then carried, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dean, thank you for joining us virtually.
Thanks, Bert. Sorry I couldn't be there, guys, but I'm here in spirit for sure.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It is kind of spooky when
It's
that
weird.
voice just comes from nowhere over the
I wish I could
over
see
the
him.
speakers. It's like, and
I can see him, so.
oh, okay, perfect.
The seance director.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So no delegations for today. We will have Cindy Brooks coming in March. I'll extend the invitation. But with the rallies and everything happening, it just seemed that February wasn't a good month to have her back. And then the question just would be, do we have any other future delegations we would like to see, maybe April or May? Okay, we'll take it under advisement. We'll try to have.
Sorry, Bert, I do have a question about delegations. May night might not be the thing, but it relates to the hydrogen conference that's taking place at the end of April. If there would be any way to get an industry spokesperson / expert to come and speak to us, even if it was virtually, I would really appreciate that. I just think that's a part of our economy that I know nothing about it, but I keep hearing about it and keep hearing that it could be a significant, or could have a significant impact. So when you're there, if you can do some networking and see if somebody could patch in and give us an overview, I'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely. So the two things that come to mind right away was that Maggie Hanna was the fellow from Energy Future Labs that spoke to us and did the hydrogen presentation when we did our EFL. Maggie would be one that we know of now, that she's sort of seen to be a Canadian expert on the industry. The other would be, there is the hydrogen group that's based out of the Industrial Heartland Hub, and we could maybe get someone to come, maybe one of their strategic folks or something like that. So those would be the two off the top of my head, but do you have anyone specifically in mind as a preference, or is Maggie a good place to start?
I don't, Bert, because like I say, I just don't have much information about the concept in general, and I really want to learn. I was registered for that and then realized that it conflicted with our April council meeting, so I had to withdraw.
Okay, well, I'll start by speaking with Maggie Hanna. There may be a small fee to get Maggie to come in to do a presentation to us, but I'm sure it's something that we could absorb, but I'll price out what I can.
At the RMA conference last fall, we had a presentation from, I forget who it was, but it was a fairly good presentation. So might reach out to the RMA and see who it was.
Will do.
Good idea.
Is there any way we could make that happen before the hydrogen conference, even if it was just, if somebody could do a quick overview?
It all
Prior
depends
to?
on when they're available.
Sure. I mean, we could do just a special briefing for the ECDev committee and do something virtually if people wanted to do that. Generally with delegations, when we bring them in, it's the same rules as we have for council. We like to try to keep delegations to about 15 minutes. So if it's sort of a special info session we're looking for where we'd like an hour or two, it might be better to do it as sort of a separate meeting, and we could set a special date.
We also, in regards to your asking for suggestions for guests or delegations, we brainstormed a list. And a couple of meetings ago, I think one was the chamber.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's a possible one. I don't have the list in front of me, but there is a list that we did generate.
Yeah, and the White Court Chamber was one that I was wondering about, and then as well, it's been over a year since we've heard from Community Futures as well.
That was the other one, yeah.
So if we could maybe put
Those
one
are
of
good
those ones
backup
on.
plans.
For the hydrogen speaker, I think that's wonderful for us to try and bring someone in. Would we like to set it up as a briefing for the ECDev committee? Do we want to set it up maybe as a virtual public meeting? What would be the committee's preference?
What I'd like to see us start with, even before making the commitment necessarily, is if you can reach out to a couple of these experts and find out what kind of online resources there are. Because I suspect that they've made presentations that are on YouTube or something like that, that we may be able to get those easily and review those before April's conference.
There are some really great resources on hydrogen on the Energy Future Labs, and then also on the Edmonton Hydrogen Hub website. There's some good resources there. I'll make sure that I send those links out.
Okay.
We'll move to strategic thinking. Oh, just a second.
No, that's fine. That's just, yeah.
And I'll paraphrase that to say I'll send those out as soon as I get my email up and running again. My apologies for the last couple of days. We've had, I shouldn't say we've had, I've had some email issues. And that brings me into the strategic thinking with why, and Councillor Dean, I apologize you don't have this in front of you, but I'll get it to you as quickly as I can. But we do have a printed, updated copy of the key performance indicators. It was a bit more of a daunting task to put it together because I basically had to retype everything. Even my copy and paste skills didn't work very well. So I've added in the 2 new columns, and I'm hoping that that's sort of the revised format that the committee would like to see, but it's all open to interpretation and edits and whatever you guys would feel you would like to do.
One of the things that in our strategic thinking, and I think Crystal's the one that kind of motivated me to think about this, and that is that I think in our goals we need to start to have a look at what ways we're going to have public engagement. And you know, I was down at what Crystal's got going. You can maybe speak on that, Crystal, a little more, with the group at Fort Assiniboine. And it's really interesting is that it's a real young demographic. And so, in my view, the public engagement has to be community-based. It has to come from those communities. And I think that we kind of have to come up with a strategy as how are we going to do that and how are we going to implement that into the bigger strategic plan that the county council is going to enter into at the end of March. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Because that's one of the pieces that's missing.
I completely agree. I think the engagement with the public, we have to be getting that feedback to be able to bring it here. So, and also from the strategic thinking end of it, I think it would be nice to have these action items easily, the achievements, easily ready to report back to the public as well. So that we have, if somebody says, well, what has the ECDF committee been achieving? Then we can take this list and say, okay, this was the goal and it's achieved. So I might have to correct what I asked for last time a little bit. I like this, it looks really good, and I'm glad to see the ongoing stuff. But maybe there should be, at the very end of it, the things that have been achieved, that they still live on there so that you can see that that's been met, that action item.
Because that is one of the problems with it now, is we sort of complete things, have been rolling them off. We haven't been sort of compiling that list. I can do that. I'm just gonna have to go back and try to put pieces together, but we're gonna
Even if
out.
it was just going forward, like, I mean, I don't know that it's necessary to go back and create a bunch of extra work. If there's something that you think of that's important, then I would add it, but I know myself, I wouldn't recommend going back and making a bunch of extra work.
Okay.
Yep.
In regards to public engagement, are you just like feedback on this, Peter, or a meeting where they have like a town hall meeting?
Well, and I think that's where we have to end up going. We have to have a strategy that says, we have these goals. We already have, like, in individual goals, like we have support this, support that. The problem that I have is that we really don't have a defined way to enter into public engagement, because we need to have, first of all, the beginning of it is an interest group. That's where it starts. So how do we engage them as a economic development board? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, how does that fit into the bigger picture? Because we really haven't defined that yet. You know, we don't know, until we have some movement, we really don't know what to do with it. So.
Well,
Here's
and,
what- Sorry, when I was just thinking about the public, I just need a clarification also in reflection to the meeting prior where we had one at Blue Ridge and one at Fort Assiniboine, and looking at the minutes, there's certain formatting I think that would need to be really curtailed, so then their voices are heard and it's the same questions, and it's just, that's what I was thinking about also.
Well, I think what we see in what was done is those are ideas. Now we have some people who are implementing some ideas. So how do we engage those folks? Because the longer we leave them sit, the less interest they're going to have in entertaining, getting involved in this. So,
Okay.
when I see groups that are starting up and that are saying, okay, this is kind of what we're starting to do, how do we bring them to the table?
Can we bring them forward as a delegation? So for example, just in tying that in, if there's, and I'm a little bit behind in this one, I've heard a couple of things about your group from some of the residents and would love to hear more. So, but I know that maybe that would be good for a delegation, would it? So that we have set specific time to hear their concerns. And then it's a little bit different than, I think town halls for a different purpose are wonderful. But if it's that one group, then if there's a couple of voices at the town hall, then maybe that one group won't be heard, would be my concern.
Okay, Alan?
Thanks, Bruce. Peter, just a question for you. What I'm hearing you say is that public engagement is not part of this strategic plan, and as a bullet point, if you will, or a heading. And I'm wondering if we can, we can certainly reformat this thing, and that's not a problem at all. But under plan of action, would public engagement fit there? Or do you want something completely separate that just says, okay, here's our plan of action, and then here's how we're going to engage our public? So my question is, could we put it in a plan of action, or do you want it separately?
Well, I think that's a good question. The plan of action is we really need a goal. We need to have a goal of how this is going to happen. Like, so it would fit into all of the goals and objectives. Like, and we need to have a method of evaluating whether whether that public engagement process is the way it should be. We need a complete, how are we going to do this? It's no different than I would say the Support Wild Alberta. Let's start with the goal: support community groups who are interested in being involved in the economic development strategies and in the county. The objective then is to make sure that their voices are heard. Like I would suggest that that's the way that we approach this, because then we'll come up with a fairly comprehensive idea of how it would look. What do you think, Bert?
So I think, we don't have it sort of clearly written down, but
Exactly.
But the level of progression that we sort of usually go through. So I'll say this is kind of the default is, usually it's myself as the EDO or someone within administration who's the initial point of contact, right? And that's the level that probably the bulk of the engagement and the work is done, whether it's me working with someone to get them through development hurdles, or whether it's we're handing them off to the development officer and that part of it. Level two would be, and I think it was a great suggestion, if we have groups that want to, we have the delegation and that forum available here. And we know just from the few meetings that we've had with this part of the committee, we've only had really the one delegation come in so far, I think. And so there's certainly that opportunity to bring delegates and to bring folks in to make presentations. When we first kind of started down this path, and we did those community meetings going back to the fall of 2018, we basically used the community cafe model and then some dot democracy basically as the engagement forum, and that was more of that that bigger town hall kind of engagement, and those two things, Peter, as you know, kind of come right out of that appreciative inquiry train of thought and all of that, and so I think that we've kind of got the three levels there now. There's kind of the administrative level, the committee level, and then sort of the community level. But we can further refine that, or we can further define that, or set up other avenues, whatever the committee would like to do.
Let's see.
Just a question. So after, let's say we have a community engagement, then the next step would be to come here or to council. Because we have had discussions when we were doing strategic planning a year where we would have someone from the ECDev committee speak or do a presentation at a council meeting if something needs to be heard, so they're aware of what we're doing. Like, that isn't in here, but it was part of our discussion a year or so ago.
Well, and that's
Is that
part
right?
of, like, with the council meeting, when council does the roundtable reports, right?
Mhm.
That's the idea of that function of the council meeting, is that's when all of our councilors give their updates on the meetings that they've attended and what they have going on. And I know Councillor Prestidge is our chair, and Councillor Cloken, Councillor Dean as well. You guys have all been giving your regular updates on that, and now we've got Councillor Wilhelm, who's actually the rep from council to Community Futures. And so he sits on that Community Futures board, which meets monthly, and then he reports back to council on that as well.
Yeah, well, okay, maybe I misunderstood at that particular time that perhaps not all the council was aware of certain discussions within the AgDev.
Well,
So
I
hence
think-
that was someone to come.
I think what
I don't know
happens
if
is
that's
with-
an offshoot of what you're mentioning too, Peter. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, because
Well, I
I mean,
think-
I think what happens is sometimes with council meetings, they do get a little bit long, and that's usually one of the last items is the meeting reports and all of that. And we haven't generally done written submissions, it's usually verbal.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so there may be some things that sort of get lost in,
Which is
lost in the
understandable.
shuffle, and even if they're not publicly shared, I know our councilors
Yeah,
work
okay.
quite well together with other council members from everything I've seen and heard, so,
No, that's good. I just remember those discussions we had,
yeah.
so.
Well,
So when I listened to Peter telling what's like about bringing in some community perspective out at Fort Assiniboine, so like for instance, when we have the area chamber of commerce, that's kind of for the economic development committee to communicate with the businesses in Whitecourt, right?
Yes, yes.
So there's nothing in Fort Assiniboine or Blue Ridge to give that communication back.
So we're members of the Barhead Chamber, and classically, the Barhead Chamber has always kind of covered the Fort Assiniboine area. We do have a couple of members from storefront businesses that are part of the Barhead Chamber. Mayor Thorpe Chamber, which they really don't exist now because they've been absorbed by a Whitecourt and District Chamber, but that was where classically we've been hearing some of the Blue Ridge stuff. So we actually do it through the BSN, so through the business support networks. Any of our business owners from the Fort can certainly attend either the Whitecourt meetings or come to the Barhead meetings, and it's the same with Blue Ridge and with Blue Ridge and with Mayor Thorpe. Yeah.
Okay, and so how is that stuff communicated? Sorry, I guess.
All of our BSN meetings are advertised, so there's the BSN website that's set up, and then when we get the BSN meetings, they're actually, each BSN meeting is advertised at least once or twice through our communications channel. So through Facebook, through the county, we send it out. And we have had notices in the past in the Fort paper, but we haven't done that recently just because we haven't had the money to advertise. But the BSN meetings themselves, the mail-outs go out to, I would say, between 300 to 400 different emails.
Hey, Alan,
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. The that question of communication, Lesia, that excuse me, you asked. I think Bert is really accurate when he says that those reports from council come at the end of the meeting, and they're not recorded in the minutes. So Peter started submitting a written report, and the first time I saw him submit that, I thought, hey, that's a great idea, because then that can go into the minutes and it can be captured and you can refer back to it. A verbal discussion, you can't, unless you watch the YouTube video. So I actually asked, not to, I didn't want to put extra homework on for counselors, but I just think that having a written report, even if it's in point form, is more valuable than having just a verbal report. So, there's three of us counselors in the room, and I don't want to hijack this meeting about that topic, but I'd ask the other two counselors to consider that, and I personally, I think there's real value in having a written report. It doesn't have to be a novel, but generally there's one or two things that happens in a committee that you go, yeah, that's worth pursuing, and you need council support.
Well, I guess the methodology of that is that it'll be actually, the report will be 2 weeks behind the meeting, because it's a requirement for us to put that in the agenda package. So in other words, it's always back, but that's all right. What it does is it gives Bert and the admin people an understanding of what our thought processes are. So, yeah.
I'm a little bit behind on this one, but from what I understand, so I'd like just some clarity around the Woodlands newspaper. that is owned and published by Woodlands County, paid for, is it not?
It is not.
It is
No,
not.
no. There's a nonprofit group that receives funding from Woodlands County that publishes the Woodlands Express. But they're a completely separate nonprofit. They do all of the work and everything themselves.
Okay,
When the county puts ads in the paper, we actually pay what their standard ad rates and that sort of thing are. But it's a completely separate outside entity.
oh, okay, perfect, because that's, when you had mentioned just about advertising, that was something that I was wondering, of course, in that newspaper with the Business Support Network, or if it's Barhead Chamber of Commerce, or, you know, if, even if we're forwarding that information, if they have just a meeting page, you know, as opposed to like an actual clear advertisement. So just that might be something that, to get some of the information out to residents.
Well, and that's always been one of the struggles is what's the best channel, right? Because I mean, we've got a limited budget on the advertising, and I mean, if we had the ability, I would be advertising every BSN meeting on behalf of our BSN group. The problem is that we don't have that ability. So all of the BSN meetings, and what's interesting with the BSN format is Woodlands County is the only municipality that's part of all 4 of the BSNs. So the government of Alberta through Alberta Labour, they're kind of the founding partner. Community Futures is kind of the other. And then as we move from community to community, as we have them for Mayerthorpe, for Barhead, for Fox Creek, and for Whitecourt proper here. It's incredibly interesting because we have a steering committee meeting for each one, and we're usually planning a couple months ahead. But the topics from community to community tend to really differ, right? And so that's where I guess from my perspective, and because I sit in on all of the steering committee meetings and then I take part in all of the BSNs, I see the value, but I maybe see it a bit differently as well because I'm like right central and involved within the process. But often information that we glean from the BSNs is stuff that I verbally end up reporting back to the committee here, or maybe we become part of our thinking as we're looking at different things and bringing in speakers, or you know, looking at like what are the hurdle topics and some of that. But in regards to looking for a better way to advertise them, I'm open to ideas. I mean, we do have a small budget from the BSN themselves because we do apply for a provincial grant on behalf of the BSN Association. But ideally what happens right now is Community Futures, they're the ones that put all of the notices together, and then they send them out electronically, and when we get them, they usually go up on the county website as well. So that's the current process, but we can sure do some upgrades.
One of the things that I can give you a contact after, but I did have a representative from Stingray Radio mention before, because we do advertising with them different times, that if there is something coming up as a community event, to reach out to them, and it may be something that they would do on their own. So I can make, now that was a year ago, and radio was really struggling a year ago, so I don't know if that offer would still stand.
Well,
But I can
and-
connect you with that contact.
Yeah, and that's been the issue with the papers and that sort of thing as well, is our chambers are usually good partners because the chambers are usually part of the BSNs in their respective communities, and so usually what happens is Christy Tutts sends it out to her distribution list, and then the chambers send them back out to their distribution list, and then the municipalities usually jump on and we send them out through the municipal channels. That's usually the bulk of the broadcasting, right? It would be wonderful if we could get them better into papers or onto radio. It's just without paying the fees and the costs, we haven't found a way to do that. But if Stingray could be an option, that's great.
Okay, I'll share that contact with you after the meeting.
Okay, just getting back to this community engagement, Bert, the reason, I'm a bit concerned about it, I guess, would be that as we go into the strategic planning with the county council, I think that there's going to be that connection made between ECDEV, probably even with Ag Service Board, of how we participate jointly in getting community engagement, both from the perspective of sharing the information of what council is doing, sharing the information of what the economic development and ag service boards are doing. I just need to have some kind of an idea of what to take to that strategic planning. If that helps you, out a little bit, maybe we can have a discussion afterwards, and that'll start to address some of these issues of how do we actually productively get our communities engaged in the process of moving a bunch of this stuff forward.
Well, and I think if we kind of go back to, I'll say, our existing sort of three-stage process would be admin, delegation, and then public meeting. I think that, as we're talking to a group, if we need to move them above the admin level, then we ask them to come as a delegation here. And then that way it can be a committee decision for us to decide what the next step may be.
Okay.
Does that sound like a fair way to proceed?
Yeah, I think it's just that we need some movement happening there. To get these delegations to believe in the fact that they're important, and Crystal, maybe is that kind of, because the frustration is that things seem to move very slowly, and that's, for those of us who've been involved in the business world where we make a decision today and act on it tomorrow, that's a little bit tough to take sometimes.
I understand. not the first time I've heard that.
I think that makes sense, Bert.
Okay, because we're certainly, and I mean, this is, I guess, something where we've never really had the discussion around the committee table with this committee, but I mean, that's where that delegate portal is open, right? I mean, the agenda that we have is the committee agenda, so we can add or subtract any bits and pieces of the agenda as we need to. If we want to bring in 3 delegations for each meeting, or 2, or even 1, that gets us above where we are at some meetings for sure. We certainly have that ability. So, yeah, I mean, wherever the committee would like to direct and go on that part of it, I think that's great. And the other thing that I want to kind of throw out as well, and councillors, I know you guys have probably seen this, but we're not a hard group of folks to digest, but for folks that aren't used to coming in and doing a formal presentation, we can be pretty daunting and pretty intimidating. And so I think that's one of the other things too, is it's great practice for somebody, especially if we feel that they may want to go on to make a presentation to council. If they have a chance to come into practice and kind of refine their comments and kind of go through the practice once at the committee level first, it makes it a bit easier on any of the prospective delegates. And then that way we can offer our constructive criticism, and and then they see some familiar faces should they go on and then be presenting to council as well. So there is that kind of education, teaching, engagement part of it that the committee can play that role with the delegation as well. So.
Anybody else?
I actually, on a different topic, on the first page of the strategic planning, it says that we are supposed to be helping host aviation events for 2022.
Yes.
Is there a list of events?
We only have the one. So classically, the air show is held every 2 years. And that goes back for about the last decade or so. I believe we've had 4 air shows that we've successfully hosted at CYZU. Last year was the year that it would have been due with the rotation, but due to COVID and all of that, it was postponed last year. In October, November, I believe it was, we were approached by Sonia Evangelist, who's the organizer, and we were told that they wouldn't be doing an air show this year, but there is likely to be air races. And so we're still waiting for a bit of further information on that. But the website, and I can send it out to everybody. We're at the administrative level and working with our director of infrastructure and with the airport manager to kind of start to lay this out. And then we have a planning group that includes the chamber, the town, and then the organizers, where we'll be meeting over the next couple of months. But what they were trying to do was to secure, could they do a northern tour for the Reno air races? And so that would be doing basically one weekend here, one weekend in Grand Prairie, and possibly one other community. And then the idea would be that we would have an air racing event that would be here probably, and I believe it was around mid-July.
That's this year still?
Yeah, so that's on the possible list.
That's been canceled for this year,
It has? Okay. See, so
2023.
that's why it's a great question, so thank you very much. In a normal year, that's what we try to do. We are in the initial phases of trying to arrange to host a COPA event, which is the Civilian Operators Event for 2023. So that's the next one that we have that's on the list. But really, we're just kind of a support on that. It's sort of infrastructure and the airport manager are the ones that are sort of the lead, but they've asked us to sort of participate and be part of the admin team.
That's it.
I'll make a motion then to accept the strategic thinking as information.
Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That's passed.
Okay, thank you. So
The
that's,
electric vehicle charging station grant.
okay, well, something that was brought to my attention a couple weeks ago is the MCAC. And if you go to mcac.ca, it's the Municipal Climate Change Action Center. And they're the group that is, it's a joint partnership between the Government of Alberta, RMA, and Alberta municipalities. And they're kind of the group that is fostering the applications for all of the different grants related to green technologies and all of that. And so there were a couple of interesting things that were on their website. What I was asked by our CAO to investigate was the electric vehicle charging program. And so I did have an opportunity to attend a webinar about that. And what it is there's basically 3 levels of charging for electric vehicles. So number 1 is you just sort of plug into a regular outlet, which takes about a day to charge up an electric vehicle. Number 2 is sort of a direct current, but like at 240 volts or 120 volts. My memory kind of fails me there, but this would be to look at the level 3 charger, which is the fast one, which is generally like 4 to 6 hours. And the idea is behind it is each charging station is about $120,000 to put in, and then depending on the related infrastructure that's needed, it kind of goes up a little bit from there. So the grant itself is for up to $200,000 per municipality, and it's funded through a federal program through NRCan. But we're trying to do an internal investigation right now on should the county apply? If we do apply, where would we put it? Would it be a public or a private station? Generally, the philosophy with Woodlands County has been we don't want to compete directly with private business. And so when you take a look at the map on, I thought I had the website on here, but maybe I don't. There is an app that you can sign up for which shows all of the charging stations within Alberta, and there is a definite hole as you go from Whitecourt further north. We've got about a 200-kilometer section where there's no public charging stations, but there's a whole myriad of different things that you get into because Tesla has one type of charger. So if you put in a Tesla charger, then it can charge Teslas, but the end isn't universal; it can't charge any other vehicles. So there's generally in North America sort of 3 different charging ends on the Type 3 stations. And so the question would be, is this something that we would do that would be public facing? Is it something that we would do that it would be inward facing towards the municipality, looking at all of the different locations and all that? So that's what's involved. So right now we're just kind of having that internal administrative discussion about it, but I wanted to share the information with the committee.
Go ahead, Alan.
Thanks, Bruce. Question for Bert. So 4 to 6 hours to charge a vehicle, that tells me that that's not somebody traveling through our county on their way somewhere, unless they were planning on staying at a friend's or something. If it takes 4 to 6 hours, I'm just wondering what the application is.
Well, and so this is the part of things that's incredibly interesting with the electric vehicles, and this is why under I can't remember whether it was the blue sky or the information items, I think under the blue sky, but I've included the information of all of the countries that have now banned fossil fuel vehicle sales from 2025 going forward. So this is the problem that we're going to have going forward with electric vehicles is if you're coming out from an urban area into rural, you're going to need 4 to 6 hours to charge your electric vehicle. So the question that they're asking on the tourism side is, how does that fit in? How do we have a fitting tourism attraction or a layover spot or that kind of thing where folks can spend 4 to 6 hours for a family? And this is where we've seen in the last year and a half, a number of different initiatives along this line of the idea of, okay, charging stations are the way that, that's the wave of the future. So if you have an electric vehicle, you've got a 400 to 500 kilometer range depending on the weather. You know that you're going to have to plug in for a minimum of a couple hours. So what are people going to do with their time? And so this is where electric vehicles and tourism, there's an equation that's there, and there's a bunch of different organizations looking at it in a bunch of different ways. Where the bulk of the charging stations are now is along the number 1 highway, and we're starting to see more of them along 16 and even some further along 43. But as you get out onto the secondaries in Alberta, that's where there's starting to be sort of holes in the grid, so to speak. So the question is going to be, are private gas stations going to come forward and be putting in charging stations? Are they going to go in at roadside stops that the province is going to put them in? There's a whole bunch of different ways that this can sort of evolve, and that's why I wanted to put it in front of the committee for information, because there's a lot of great questions that we need to ask around what would we like to see as a vision around electric charging station.
Patricia.
I did look into this a fair bit, watched the webinar and so on that was attached as well. And basically what I see, I don't see the 4 to 6 hour station really being of any value. I suspect, based on some of the other areas, what we'd be looking at is a phase 3 station. Now, that being said, so here, Edson does have one that's the closest to the south. Spruce Grove is the closest in that direction, Westlock, High Prairie, and Grand Prairie. So when you say there's a gap, there's definitely a gap in this area. So I think for us, it does present an opportunity, because in looking at it, some of the items to consider in order to get this grant, the grant is up to 100% refundable, up to their limit of the $200,000, but it has to be built on municipally owned land. So that's one of the considerations. And I think one of the other items to look at is, what is Whitecourt doing? Is Whitecourt looking at putting in the same situation? Because if it is, then that basically fills that gap, and that would open up other areas for us, whether that be potentially Fort Assiniboine, Blue Ridge, the Whitecourt Airport, or a western or an eastern location on Highway 43 at the maybe at the outside barriers of the county. Now, there's also one of the other items to consider is that you need phase 3 power. So, and you want to be as close to the power source as possible, because then you're not dealing with higher expenses for trenching and so on. And as far as the county retaining it long term, then we have to have staff that are going to go in and sand it and remove the snow and so on. So with that part of it, currently, my conclusion when I kind of looked at it is, I think we need to make sure that if it's something we go forward with, that we can afford the cost without cost overruns. The big question that I would have is, how long do we need to own it before we can sell it? So, go ahead.
No, and that's an excellent question, and this is where in the conversation that I had with Andre, our director for infrastructure, we were thinking, these can be used for internal county use as well. And so that's where the idea is, you know, where are we going with our Zambonis and with our fleet? Because if we're moving any of them electronic, maybe what we need to do is it becomes a county-facing facility and it's not a public facility.
According to the conditions of the grant, they specifically say you cannot use it for your Zamboni and so on.
Well, see, and on the webinar, I thought he had said that you could, because there was one of the rink operators that had asked.
Yeah,
But-
there was a question, pardon me,
That's what I heard as well.
that
on
you
the webinar.
cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if
because
we-
I watched, yeah, that question was that, what they're trying to do, is my understanding, is they're trying to basically create these stations to increase the grid in rural areas. So for example, and it's open to every municipality, so whether Edmonton has only 200,000, we have 200,000, but Edmonton has private areas. So I think going forward, I don't see this as a money maker for the county based on hourly usage, because the hourly usage is gonna be about $2 an hour, it looks like.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, the opportunity I see here for us is that we can build our community by increasing the grid. We can get the grant money for up to 100% of it, literally sell it to the private sector. And even if we sell it to the private sector for half of what it costs to build it, we're still in $100,000. And then we take that and put it into new equipment or whatever it is that we're looking for.
I guess it serves a purpose as well then to have an inventory of number one, where those stations possibly could be, so we know, because the way I see this is then you would probably be able to have in rural Alberta, you would be able to have those charging stations in the areas where they should be, and most of the power lines, the three-phase power lines, follow the main areas and the branch outs. So we would have to have a map developed that says where does it strategically make sense to put these.
Yeah.
Because if this is we have to understand that as much as we are skeptical, this is the direction that our main legislation is going. So it's better to be ahead of the curve than behind it. So I think that would be a beginning place, is to start looking at developing a strategy of where this would look, what this would look like. And then determine, because I'm pretty sure that you would have private investment that, like these triple P partnerships, you would have something like that happen as well.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, and this is where in the last couple of years and sort of watching this, I'm scrolling through my history here to find the website, because there is a website you can sign up on which shows all of the charging stations and all of the networks that they're part of, because that was the other stipulation, is it has to be networked. So there's only, I think there was 3 or 4 companies that only provide the networked ones, and then you need a card, like it's like a loyalty-based card or a credit card, that kind of thing to run them. But I mean, you're exactly right in regards to where do we put it and how do we have it facing, because we've also seen from the province that they may be renovating the roadside rest stops that the province has in order to put these in, simply, as you said, because of the proximity to three-phase power and some of that. And so that's where there's, it's undoubtedly the wave of the future, but there's a lot of question marks that are around it. And so I know that's where Andre and I had said, well, we'll start to take a look at it. In regards to where the town is, I know there were several urban municipalities that were all investigating putting in charging stations, and I think it was through this program. So I know Edson was one of them that was part of that group. We didn't formally kind of join and follow through with that group, so I can get an update from my counterpart from the town as to where they're at, but I know that they were looking at the viability of putting one in. In regards to being able to do it and sell it to the private sector, I think that's an excellent question. That's something that I hadn't thought of, because I thought it had to be municipally owned, but that's a great follow-up question for them.
It definitely does need to be municipally, oh, sorry.
Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. You took the words out of my mouth, Patricia. I love that idea, that the county could actually make $1 on something. Yeah, we have to research, and to Peter's point, you know, unless there is a risk of losing the grant opportunity, I don't think there's the time is of the essence. Like, we don't want to leave this for a year or anything, but you know, Peter's concept of let's identify and then do some planning around it, that makes a whole lot of sense. But I mean, if we were able to find an operator that was kind of waiting in the wings, and say it was a 10-year period or something like that, then that's a win for everybody.
Something else that's happening is car dealerships. They're talking that if you're gonna sell electric vehicles, you have to have a charging station.
That's a good idea.
So there could be quite a few charging stations around.
And the website is called PlugShare, so PLUGSHARE. Yeah, you go in, you need to put in your email and that kind of thing to log in. But on the PlugShare website, it shows you all of the charging stations available within the area.
And what's it?
And that was the one that he had shared during the webinar. And I went and logged in, and it only took a couple minutes to set the login up. But yeah, it was really surprising, just as you said. There's one in Stony Plain, and then there's one in Grand Prairie, and the rest is kind of a dead zone through here.
This way.
That's where the tow trucks are. In the dead zone.
That's
Okay, Crystal.
Is there been any talk about hydrogen vehicles at any of these hydrogen workshops that you guys have been doing?
The answer is yes, and
I was just gonna say,
I've got some information I can share in committee related to that. But we do know as well that hydrogen is certainly the preferred fuel for heavy vehicles, right? So generally the thinking, and this is maybe a really minimal summarizing of it, but you know, if it's a personal vehicle, it's probably going to be electric. If it's a commercial vehicle, it's probably going to be hydrogen. And just simply because with hydrogen, you're back to 5 to 10 minutes to fill. You know, you get 500-600 kilometers. You've got the same kind of torque and performance. Cold weather doesn't have the same negative effect. All of that, right?
And I think the workshop that we went to, it was hydrogen. It was a composite hydrogen diesel mix that would be in the commercial vehicles, and it's a hydrogen infusion process, I guess. And that's basically what they said, was it was going to be only in commercial vehicles, because hydrogen cannot be burnt in an internal combustion engine as we know it right now, because it creates too many carcinogens as far as the you know, gas operated type of vehicles. So yeah, so there's lots of work being done on that right now.
Patricia.
Just getting back to the EV grant quickly, it is, from what I understand, fairly time sensitive and would have to be in by the end of the year. So I gotta figure out how to word that. But basically what I'd like to consider as a motion going forward is, for me, one of the number one questions is, can we sell it? So if we can determine whether or not we can sell it after X amount of period of time, then I think that would really shape where it goes. So, because if we have it on, if we put it in and it's on the outer edge of Highway 43 at the county line, and we have to send somebody out there to sand it in a winter like we have today, then it's gonna be a losing money operation.
Yeah.
You know, so I think operators that have other businesses would weigh in heavily on where the location would go.
Okay, Alan?
Yeah, to that point, Patricia, I was prepared to make a motion to direct administration to come back to the committee with details on possible location and whether or not the infrastructure could then be transferred or sold to another party.
Perfect.
Would you like to put that forward as a motion then, Councillor Dean?
Yeah, sorry, that was a motion.
Okay, very good. So identify possible locations and I can certainly ask a follow-up question of MCAC. Can we sell it at some point? What are the restrictions? And I'll come back with those for the next meeting.
Okay, I'd just like to make a comment. If we do something like this, we wanna put it in a place where it's not gonna be close to like White Court or someplace that probably will not get a charging station, like Assiniboine.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Plus with
no,
a
I
young
agree.
population there,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
because
thinking.
to get somebody to go into Fort Assiniboine to put a private charging station in, it's probably not,
Exactly.
makes more sense to me.
Yeah, that's, I think, why we need that joint mapping done to understand where they would be the best suited for location.
Yeah, because I mean, we would have a possible plethora of locations from adjacent to fire halls to adjacent to community halls to in front of the Blue Ridge Library maybe, right? I mean, yeah, there's some good possibilities. And I know vandalism on some of these pumps has been an issue, so.
Patricia?
Just to Bruce's point as well, that was one of the reasons too when I had mentioned Fort Assiniboine and Blue Ridge. But I think around the Fort Assiniboine area, there's a lot of summer people, you know, and I think more of the EVs that we might be getting in are campers and stuff that are people that are going to the lakes and so on, and using that area as well would open it for tourists.
Okay, Alan?
Yeah, I'm assuming this is a discussion to the motion. Is that what we're doing right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then I just would like to counter your suggestion that locating this in an area away from Whitecourt is the best idea. And certainly Bert's going to come back with a bunch of locations and we'll have this discussion at that point. But even if this is free to the county, as a federal taxpayer, I'm not in favor of spending $200,000 of taxpayers' money on something that doesn't get used. So I think location, traffic is really, really important. And like I say, we'll have this discussion when Bert identifies different locations.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? No. It's passed. Next is 6.2. Can't say that word today.
Well, once every 5 years, we get to use that. Holy cow, how many ways can you cut census data? 1,001. So the overall summaries are there. I think that the big stories are both Whitecourt and Woodlands had decreases in their population over the last 5 years, which probably doesn't come as much of a surprise. The good news comes in two parts. First, it's not as bad as it could have been. Some of our neighbors hit the top 10 list in Canada for fastest shrinking municipalities. And when you look at the northwest of Alberta overall, my quick tally is we're down somewhere between 10 to 15,000 population from northwest of Edmonton to Grand Prairie. So some of our neighbors had abysmal numbers. You know, when you consider the national growth average was about 5%, when you see municipalities coming in at -11, -16, and you know that's Barrhead County, Lac La Biche County, Yellowhead County, Greenview County, they were all above 10% for how much they shrunk. It's kind of terrifying. So the good news is it's not as bad as it could have been, but if you move back to a 10-year average, and we go back to the 2011 census, from 2011 to 2021, we're still at about a 7% growth rate. So that part of things is actually not too bad when you consider and go back to the 2011 numbers. And we know that there's more to come. We also have in the arbitration some formulas and some things that are gonna be based around county and town population, and so we'll wait and see where those parts of things go. But, you know, as we're all told, when we go to do the census numbers are incredibly important, and it's important to stand up and be counted because those numbers are used for so many funding roles and things within municipalities, and they help us on everything from hospitalization to roads to intermunicipal agreements. And so hopefully our numbers are as close and as accurate as Stats Canada can get them, and we know we'll have the full-on community profiles will probably be released next year. Usually the rough census data or this count is usually comes about a year after the census, and then the full community profile, which gives all of the demographics and all of the household income information and all of that, that usually comes about 2 years after. And related to this census is, of course, the agricultural census. And we're waiting on those ag census data numbers because that's always incredibly interesting to see as well. We know we're gonna have more cattle than people, but the question is just how many more cattle than people, and how is our ag center, our ag industry doing? So those were some of the highlights. Certainly starting to see more urbanization, and it's gonna be interesting now over the next 5 years because of course we are hearing and seeing, and I've just read a couple of recent articles this week of as many as 40,000 people moving from Toronto into the surrounding suburbs and 20,000 people out of Montreal and all of that. So we're starting to see an urban depopulation post-COVID. So, and we know we've got more subdivisions and more folks moving into the county because folks want acreages or summer places or their own private camping areas or what have you. So it's kind of interesting. So more to come on the census, but that's the initial data.
Any comments?
I make a
Motion. I'll make a motion to accept the information as, or to accept the item as information.
Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Any opposed? It's passed.
Thank you. And if you're bored on a Friday night and want something fun to do, just go on the Stats Can data and just scroll through it. It's kind of amazing some of the stuff that's on there. I think back one of my favorite meetings from several years ago was we actually had a presentation from about a half a dozen statisticians from Stats Canada, and they were so excited at the 5 different ways they cut the data before they release it. And it's just a different world.
Okay, we'll move on to 6.3, hybrid wireless.
So I'm happy to say we were contacted by Hybrid Wireless, and I had a chance to do a virtual presentation with them. It was their business development officer and then the company founder that we kind of did a 3-person electronic meeting, and the slide deck that they shared is with us. But what's interesting with them is they're industrial based, but they are actually, they're not an ISP, but they're an actual fiber operator. So when we talk about the fiber backbone for our region, they're basically the second line that connects from Grand Prairie back through to the hub within Edmonton. And they are providing right now all of the industrial support for the Cap-Sierra pipeline, as well as they do some work with other municipalities. As you go through the slide deck, there's the picture of the Fox Creek fire station and all of that. And so they provide and do all of their support for their fire and emergency services. But we also have some individual local ISPs that do contract with them to buy their bandwidth and all of that. And so it kind of fills in sort of, I won't say a missing piece, but it gives us a little bit more background on understanding the infrastructure around broadband and that kind of thing within our region. So we know we've got the provincial backbone, and then we know that we've got TELUS and some of the other large telecoms that have their own large infrastructure. These guys are kind of interesting because they do service that industrial and that commercial need. And any ISP provider that would like to set up a residential-based network and buy bandwidth from them, they would certainly welcome that conversation. So, yeah, I just thought it was kind of interesting to have a chance to speak with them, and the presentation kind of stands for itself, but if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer, or we can relay them back to them.
Okay, comments, questions?
Okay, well, that's the motion. Awesome.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept the item as presented for information.
Any discussion?
Thank you.
I call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Okay, so on to the work plan updates. So number one, growth Rita in Wild Alberta. Peter, I'm gonna lean on your shoulders a bit, and then I'll fill in. What would you like to share?
Well, we had a growth meeting yesterday, and the problem we have is how the funding is dropped off from the different municipalities. You know, they've, for whatever reason, chosen in their budgets not to support the growth initiative. So I believe Swan Hills, Mirthorpe, Barhead at this point is still in, and Woodlands County are the participants. One of the interesting pieces is that Wild is the one that has the traction. Wild's the one that really we can see that is going to be beneficial. So what we're looking at now is that they've put together, they've hired a guy to upgrade the website. So the Wild website is going to be upgraded. But the struggle that we have is looking at the corporate structure, what it's going to look like. And our belief is that in the discussions yesterday, and it has to do with a lot of discussion with Bert because he understands the system a lot better than we do, that growth will still be the mothership, but Wild is the one that we're going to focus on because that's the one that we can actually say has a lot of value. So what's going to happen is that they've got basically a presentation roadshow that they're going to do to all these different communities, like that. Some of the ones that have opted out, and we're going to create a hub of where we start selling this Wild piece. And in order, I believe this is how it works. In order to maintain the RETA funding, that growth still has to exist as a center because that's where the funding goes through. And the provincial government has said once we lose that RETA, we don't get that funding anymore. So that's very important because it's a big piece of the pie. So what we're trying to do now is to separate the hub from Wild. So what the ask is going to be is that any of the communities that get involved will have a $1 per capita that will be directed at Wild through the Growth Alliance. And the ones that are paying $1.60 right now will be the mother group. That's kind of how we're looking at it. And I think that it's going to be really important for how we sell this. One of the things we discussed yesterday is that what a lot of the municipalities don't realize is that there's a tremendous, in that TRF funding, I think Walter told me yesterday that is one that they think they're going to get for sure, and that's the federal part. And one of the things that's really interesting is that the federal government and provincial government have decided that they're going to not do a lot of work in the Banff, Waterton, down Jasper corridor anymore. They're going to shift that into central and north. And I know some operators already that have got grants to improve their lodges, their facilities, and like, you know, in the $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 range for smaller operators that are very designated to improve the focus of what they're doing. And that would have never happened unless there would have been organizations like this, because that's where the effort went into. So we have to really sell this, and I think that kind of encapsulates what we're trying to do at Growth right now. Is that
I
what?
think that was an absolutely excellent summary. The bits to add would be, so we have received the request from Walter to come in to make a presentation to Woodlands County Council. And they would like to do that probably sometime in March. I know they had requested this upcoming meeting, but I think we'll have to move it to probably the beginning of March meeting, maybe the later in March meeting, so we've got to get back to them on that. But as part of the Wild Steering Committee group, we've been meeting every second Monday evening to kind of go through that slide deck and the strategy and what to present and all of that. And it is really interesting to see how that partnership has come together, because the critical part of it is that we have not just municipalities at the table, but we've got municipalities, we've got operators and First Nations. And that's where the pitch on Wild is sort of coming from. So the unfortunate thing for a lot of the provincial and federal grant funding is you need an organization that has got at least 2 years of established financials before you can apply. And so that's why Growth has to sort of stay as the parent organization. The only concern that I have is that we're basically at the point, and I know Mayor Jabush, who's our, the board right now is basically, it's a board-driven organization, so Mayor Jabush is providing a lot of the chutzpah and the horsepower, but there is an MOU that she's kind of put together. The downfall is right now is we can come in, we can make the ask of municipalities, and really the question has to be, well, we know you don't want to be part of Growth, but we're going to do this really cool thing around tourism. By the way, would you mind cutting a check to Growth? Because that's who the money has to run through. So that's where it's a bit of there's a bit of an issue there. But I think if people understand that 90% of the Growth Directive now is going to be tourism focused, and we're just going to keep the percentage that we need so that we can maintain that provincial grant funding, I think that covers off a lot of it.
Crystal?
Is there, would it be appropriate to have them come in and do their speech as a delegation?
Absolutely.
I don't know much about this organization.
I think that would be a great delegation to come and ask to come to our next meeting here.
Alan? You're muted.
I'm sorry. I'd like to spin this a little bit positive. I think that the group that is working with Growth now and has kind of carried it through this transition of funding, etc., is to be commended. If you go back 10 years ago, there were, I think, 11 RETAs around the province, and one of the first ones that dropped out was, excuse me, sorry you guys, was Gare, which was that Highway 16 corridor. And with the amount of tourism that's in Jasper and the municipalities that have are very, very solvent, have good financial statements, I was shocked that one went by the wayside. And for Growth to persevere through this I really think they're to be commended. And to Crystal's question, I think there's nothing wrong with having a delegation, but Peter and Bert have essentially outlined what Growth and the Wild project is all about. But so who else would we bring in, Peter, if we were going to have a presentation?
Well, I think first of all Bert has probably the best handle on exactly how this thing works. So that could be a presentation that's made in conjunction with something like what Walter would bring in, so we could establish that link.
Yeah.
And the other part of what you had mentioned with the financing, like cut me a check and then we're going to give it to this, the point is that growth has counselors on that board that still have oversight. So I don't,
Yeah.
that's the oversight that we need if we're asking municipalities. So I don't see that as critical an issue because it works much the same as what the Golden Triangle does. Am I correct?
Yes.
So-
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing, and this is where I've had some conversations with Mayor DeBush and with Peter on the governance piece and on how growth can kind of move forward, because the terms of reference for we call it the WADMO subcommittee, so the Wild Alberta Destination Marketing Organization subcommittee that we formed back last year, and that's the kind of steering group that's been meeting. When that terms of reference was put together, the end goal was to spin Wild off as its own entity. But what we've come to the realization is that if we spin it off as its own completely separate legal entity, we don't have the financial history. So we can't apply for the grant windows and applications that are going to be open for the next couple of years. So that's kind of the first barrier. And then the second barrier is you're getting rid of, as Peter mentioned, that municipal oversight, right? Because it's really hard for municipalities to make a contribution to something when they don't have a counselor or someone sitting over guiding those funds. And so that's where on the Golden Triangle, the way we do it is it's a 6-way municipal partnership. It isn't its own legal entity, but it's an actual signed agreement from 6 municipalities where everybody puts in $15,000, so there's 90,000 that's working. And then we work with the 3 snowmobile clubs and the budget and everything is dispersed, and that's how that part of it works. So there is that possibility for maybe doing something like that as a just as an agreement, but that might spin out of the RETA. But the RETA entity still has to be essential because the RETA is what we need to get the $50,000 in provincial funding, and we also need the RETA to maintain the financial history and just the overall organizational history. Because Councillor Dean, thank you for your kind comments, because as you said, perseverance is going to be the key. I know the RETA is going to bounce back from where it's at now. So if we have to slide into a maintenance mode for a couple of years, this is a great way for us to do it. But to fully separate the 2 entities as what's in the TOR just doesn't seem to be working, or doesn't seem to be the right path. Sorry.
Hey, Peter?
Well, and one of the things that there's a subcommittee, the Ag Profile Committee. I think there's a place where that's going to move as well at some point in time. Now, I haven't quite got my head wrapped around exactly how that'll look like, but I can see that the way that it's developing is that there's a good possibility that that's something that's going to be important to other municipalities and could possibly have a space under growth at some point in time. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Bert, but I see some value there.
The more, and I guess this kind of goes back to my feeling about the BSNs too. You know, Woodlands we've got a regional perspective on the things that we do. So being part of the BSNs, it gives us regional input and regional information. Being part of all of the chambers, it's the same thing. Being part of the RETA is the same thing. If there's a way to evolve something regionally around agriculture, that would be fantastic. I mean, you know, it opens up more ways for us to be able to expand and to partner. And like you said, I'm not sure what it may look like, but I'm happy to hear that everybody, or that you feel that we're on the right track. And you know, if we can see some traction, that's the most exciting thing.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so what I was going to suggest then is, instead of coming as the delegation, what if we were to simply share the slideshow? Because that's something that I haven't done yet, which we've been working on what is the final version? And I think we're there. So if we're at the final version, I can share the slideshow, and then we know we can tune in for when they present to council. Would that be okay?
That would be awesome.
Okay. So I will share that final slideshow.
Alan?
Thanks, Bruce. And to the new committee members, I want to apologize. I don't in any way want to suggest that the lack of knowledge that's out there is not something that we want to rectify. And, kudos for you guys for taking interest in trying to clarify things. But we simply have two key members right here at the table that can answer those questions directly. So I think when you go through that slideshow, we've got resources right here to clarify things.
And this is one of those things too that comes back to the question I always ask, which is how much do you want me to share? Because you know that I'll keep talking unless you cut me off. So, thank you. So for the ag profile piece, again with that, I'm meeting with Dawn and with Carol on kind of a bi-weekly basis, and what we've come up with is the idea that what we would need for Carol would to do a warm intro letter, and so that's included as part of the package. So I just wanted to put that in for committee info. If you have any feedback on the letter, certainly willing to take it, but it has been through the wise editing eyes of a newspaper editor, so I'm thinking it's probably pretty good, but certainly we can make any changes. Okay, so next item then is the virtual career expo. So again, everybody probably knows the history, but I'll just do a quick revisit. This is usually an October in-person event, and we weren't able to hold it in 2020 because of COVID. 2021, we had delayed to December and then decided to move it online in February. So our February 24th date is coming up. If you go to that feed loop link, again, all of the information is out. So we're advertising it actually through the BSNs because our regional BSN meeting for February is actually Todd Hirsch. Todd Hirsch is the economist with ATB Financial. So we've been able to secure Todd to talk to the BSN crowd, but that's also going to be the keynote speaker over the lunch hour at the Career Expo. So everybody who signs up for the BSN meeting actually also gets registered for the Career Expo. So we've got about 40 or so virtual booths. Woodlands is one of them. The Woodlands booth will be manned by myself and by Aaliyah Elliott, who's our brand new HR coordinator. So we're looking forward to that. We've got a training session coming up here on the 17th. But the booth, the information, all of the online stuff is there. The schools have all of the kids registered and that sort of thing. So we'll have all of the kids that'll come in, anybody that registers for to attend the BSN event, they also get the registration for the Career Expo. So it's open to the public. There's no cost. We just want people to basically come in and take a look at the job opportunities and things that are available within our region. And it's the first time we've ever done it virtually, so fingers are crossed. But I think we've learned all we need to learn to be able to pull it off and do it well. And we'll have more after the 24th.
I keep beating this one about the survey for the broadband and the link in regards to the career fair. Was that possible?
So the career fair, it should have been out already. And then I know I talked to Nikita last week because there's actually some related stuff now through RMA for that Sierra site test.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Nikita was going to send it out through our Facebook channel last week. I think that it went out. I can double check with him
Maybe
to see.
this wasn't on my thing, but I know that has been a discussion. I, of course, had to find out the answer.
No,
Thank you.
and thank you very much for following up. But yeah, we did find actually through the RMA website. RMA has put some information out now on that Sierra speed test. And so I think we picked up and copied some of that, and he's put it out through our Facebook page for sure.
Thank you.
At least if it didn't go last week, it should go soon, because I know we had that discussion last week.
I will check.
Yeah, just You have in those booths, you do have somebody from the Green Certificate Program. I see that is going to be at that Career Expo.
Now,
How do they do that? Is that a virtual thing or?
yes, so I know we've got about 40 different exhibitors. And so the idea is when you're registered, you come in and you can just kind of bounce from booth to booth to booth, and then we've got some online guest speakers and all of that. We're in the process of taping kind of about a 1-minute welcome from the mayor as well, which will be up on the main page. Because we'll have a couple of the mayors and the school board superintendents will all be doing welcome messages. But yeah, it really is like once you're registered and you're in, it really is you navigate it as you would. Like
Okay.
the intent is to have it basically as close to attending an in-person trade fair, where if you're walking along and you see an exhibitor you want to stop and visit, you can certainly do that. What's interesting is so for the sponsors actually have the ability to do a 20-to-1 within their booth. So you can have one person on the video chat and then up to 20 people that you're talking to. So that was an upgrade that we had to do through Feedloop, but for anybody that put money in, so that includes Woodlands, White Court, and all of the other partners, we all have that 20-to-1 capacity. For the folks that are just the regular exhibitors, it's a 1-to-1 capacity. So we're hoping that, if anybody needs to upgrade, I mean, if we replicate using the platform again in future years, it was about a $5,000 investment for us to book it for this year. So we want to test the platform, see how it works. What's interesting this year is we're actually getting some provincial interest because Christy has done for us, she's put the career fair on the list of provincial trade fairs that Alberta Labour has, and so we may get more out of region participants this year because it's virtual. So there's a couple of different background elements of it that we're kind of watching, but the planning group we've done our best to put something together that we hope is going to work well for everybody.
Packages?
And so the meeting packages and agenda items, I just wanted to do a quick follow-up there. I had a really good chat with Shannon, who's our administrative professional, and to send our meeting package out 2 weeks early, it really puts us out of sync with all of the other boards and committees, and it takes us out of the scope of sort of where our boards and committee policy is. Because the idea is we try to do the 3 days so that the information is as current as we can make it. So the other part of it is if we publish it, then it's published that extra week early as well, and it's harder to make some changes and all of that. So it can be done, but what I tried to do this time instead, and this is the way that if the committee is amenable, I'd like to kind of proceed. Anything that's big, I will try to send out as early as I can because I know it's a lot of reading. I mean, I know for me, when I'm compiling the meeting packages, it generally takes like 2 to 3 days to kind of put all the bits and pieces together and get my thinking right and all of that. And I can only try to imagine what it must take to unravel it on the other end. And so it always comes back to that constant question that I'm asking, which is, am I giving you too much? Am I giving you enough? And this is why I appreciate the questions, because sometimes I may go down the wrong rabbit hole and stuff may not be as relevant as what other things are. So I'm always kind of looking for help and guidance, but it just, in regards to getting it out, the full meeting package out that much earlier, it really takes us out of sync with all of the other boards and committees. And so there's a little bit of kind of administrative queasiness about that. So I'm just curious if, we can kind of piecemeal the big items, if that would be okay.
Patricia?
Yes, to speak to that definitely, because I know when I had brought that up, even if there's, draft items that will be included that we got a week earlier, because in looking at this, I think, all of us here want to be well informed when it comes to the talking points at the meeting so that we can make the right decisions. And with this package, just this week's, for example, by the time you went through and watched the webinars, read the package information, looked up any questions you have, I would think you're You know, I know how much time I spend. I would think the average person is 4 to 8 hours. And if we get the package on a Friday, then if somebody's gone for the weekend and they're working, anything like that, I just don't think that the entire package to wait for that amount of time, if you have 8 hours of prep to put into the meeting, is giving us the opportunity to do the committee justice.
Is there a sweet spot? I guess because the question that I always, you know, I mean, I live this stuff, and I've spent 17 years living this stuff. And when I got when I got the Stats Canada data, like, I mean, I know this is public, but yeah, I did. I went and I had supper, and I came back and I sat on the website and I went, oh, that's cool. That's cool. But that's me, you know. And I know in one of our emails I kind of jokingly said, well, doesn't everybody love to read statistic reports on a Sunday morning? Apparently, some people might not. You know, so I guess the question is there kind of a sweet spot? And I mean, you know, like the hybrid wireless part of things, that's important. That webinar link, well, that was kind of important, but it's important information for me. Is it relevant to the committee, I guess? And that's where I always have kind of, you know, I want to make sure that I never want to create the feeling that I'm trying to keep the committee in the dark, but if I'm oversharing, we can pull that back.
Crystal?
Is there any way that we could get like the presentations and stuff sent out maybe on the Monday or the Wednesday so that we've got some time to watch presentation stuff? Because I can certainly read through things quickly, but when I've got to sit down and make time to actually sit and watch something,
Yeah.
I know I didn't get a chance to do it.
Okay, that I will do my best to do that. I know because this was going into a public forum and what they had presented to me, the hybrid wireless presentation, they wanted to make some tweaks to. So I think I didn't get that until about probably Tuesday, Wednesday. But as soon as I have a presentation like that, yes, I can certainly share those ahead of time for sure. And if it's a webinar link or something like that, I can certainly share those. So I'll do my best to kind of unpack those bits, absolutely.
That would be
Thank
awesome
you.
for me.
Well, also, some of those could be shared with the board, and maybe they don't come on the agenda, but still share them, because they could be good information.
Right, okay. That sounds wonderful. Okay, super duper. Well, I know we had mentioned that last meeting, and I wanted to make sure you guys didn't think it had just kind of fallen off the side of the desk, so thank you.
Okay, childcare follow-up.
I think Patricia may have had,
Oh, that's okay. I just had a quick comment. I definitely like more information. I really like what you've been giving us
okay,
and that part of it. So I just want to be really clear that I'm not complaining about there being too much information. I think that's really important. All I mean is that with that part of it, I just want to make sure that all of the committee members have enough time to look at it. So, and I'm also the one who would love looking at stats Sunday morning.
okay, well, cool.
So, but
That's awesome.
I know not everybody has time for that. So.
Sunday morning census review process.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, basically, I think Bruce is saying don't encourage him.
You
Thank
two
you.
can get together for breakfast on Sunday.
Thanks.
Thank you, and it's very, very reassuring to know that. I mean, the problem with economic development that I've always had is it is such a broad field, and how do you narrow it down, right, to what's relevant and what can you actively make decisions on, and yeah. Okay, so on to the childcare follow-up piece. So I did have a meeting with Heather from Community Services and then with Joan, our manager for development as well. And we basically came out with kind of the following 3 follow-up comments. So, you know, as we've always done, we want to make sure that we've got the resources internally, that we're always going to support any private initiative that we can that is related to childcare. So being able to guide people forward to the right resources, helping them through on the business planning part of it, helping them with location selection, all of those kinds of things that we would normally do. We want to make sure that we continue through and that we do all of that, and that we would extend that support to all private initiatives that would end up coming forward. Understanding as well, and taking it to be that, you know, having affordable childcare opens up employment opportunities for parents. And I think that's really kind of the rationale behind that federal argument. And when we take the Quebec history into account and all of that, and with the direct history we have within the county, I know that was what Heather had commented, is that, you know, and we have to make sure that we use the term parents, not just moms, because it does allow dads to go back to work too, and it opens up the labor force in general. So affordable childcare locally, we know opens up employment opportunities. And the third point is we'll work with communications to develop an infographic showing what are the advantages of being licensed versus operating privately. Because the understanding that we've got with that federal funding and with other funding streams is that there may be multiple parts to it. Some of it may be funding that comes through to the organization, some of it may be subsidy that's paid or tax credits that are paid directly to the participating individuals. And so as a result of that, if you're running a licensed operation, your participants have access to all of that as well. You may have access to the subsidy. So we were going to kind of break some of that out and do the infographic. But those were really kind of the three main things that we came up with after we met to report back. We didn't really feel that a subcommittee at this time would have much of a frame of reference or much of a, we weren't quite sure what kind of grist they would have to work on. Because, you know, the federal program is there, the provincial legislation is there, the provincial training is there. We kind of thought, you know, helping people understand and navigate that whole maze is probably the better role for us to play at this point than to have a subcommittee.
Any comments?
Just maybe one comment. I'm curious about either a poll through SurveyMonkey or something online or a town hall. Do we have any indication of what the appetite is from our county residents for these programs across any of the groups that you're aware of? Like, I know it's not just an EDC question.
It's an excellent question, and I don't know. So that, I mean, we could certainly take a look at that idea of, you know, do we do some kind of a countywide poll or survey to take a look at it at need and accessibility and all of that? I mean, I'm sure we could probably work to put something like that together.
Okay, Alan?
Thanks, Bruce. Patricia, that's a great idea. And to Bruce's point, or pardon me, to Bert's point about, you know, how you help potential operators, the way I'm looking at this, or the way that I think you're going to attack this, Bruce or Bert, is kind of like helping people navigate those grants. Like, you know, I've never had to fill out a grant application, and I'm glad, because it's onerous. And some people are really good at it, and when you've done it a few times, it becomes easier. And so, you know, if we can help, you know, get rid of that red tape, if you will, and wade through those types of things, I think it'd go a long way to helping make somebody successful. But coming back to Patricia's idea, I think that's a fantastic idea, that we put a SurveyMonkey out to all our county residents. And, you know, I don't think there's any harm in including Barrhead and Marythorpe and Whitecourt, because our residents may choose to operate a facility in one of those locations. And, you know, it's still our residents that we're helping.
Yeah, it's certainly something that we can work with communications on. I know we've done other polls, and I think as the county we subscribe to SurveyMonkey or one of the online polling mechanisms. So yeah, I think we can certainly pursue that.
For sure.
I would just want to make sure that we also have another mechanism, if it's not just SurveyMonkey, but when I'm thinking in the rural areas that don't have great internet, you know, and getting the word out to those parents as well. And I also just kind of, with what Alan had mentioned with these applications and so on, a lot of what I see is these owner operators that would be eligible for some of these grants are they're the childcare providers themselves, so they're not gonna be grant experts, and it's gonna be likely imperative, the only way some of them are gonna get them is with the support of some of these other community partners.
That was one of the comments that came from our meeting as well, is that, you know, we've probably got other childcare operators within the county that aren't at that level of they're certified and they're licensed and all of that. And I think that, you know, as it is with any of our storefront or home-based businesses, the more that we can kind of get over that hump to be officially registered and officially set up and developed and, you know, papered up the way that they need to be, it's better for everybody, right? But there are humps and hurdles, as has been mentioned.
Alan, do you have another question or?
Yeah, I don't mean to stifle the conversation, but I'd just be prepared to make a motion to direct administration to come back with a plan to survey area residents and perhaps some, you know, sample questions for this committee to review.
We have a motion on the floor, any discussion?
I think it sounds great.
Okay. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Excellent, and that should wrap up those items. Do we want a motion to approve overall?
Sorry, I have just
Oh,
one more
sorry.
Oh,
quick
okay.
comment. But the, like, one of our goals and objectives is to implement the no-fee business directory.
Yep.
Is that a service that could be provided to a business? Like,
Absolutely. So one of the things that I'm a bit behind on is trying to get calls out to all of our businesses to say, hey, we have the business directory, I want to put your information on. Anyone right now, and I'll say this to the cameras, anyone right now who's in the county that has a business, please call me, we'll put all of your details on our business directory. If you go to woodlands.ab.ca onto the business pages, the business directory is there. We've got about 50 or so listings on it now. If we have that thing at 300 plus, that would be fantastic.
Give a motion to accept for information. That's a motion.
To accept the information.
Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Passes. So next is our blue sky discussion.
Okay, and on the items for Blue Sky, we have a couple of things. So we are certainly seeing the long-term changes within the labor market, and I thought the OWL had kind of summarized some of those, but as we've sort of discussed and talked about, you know, we're starting to see the baby boomers beginning to exit the economy, and that's creating a whole set of new hurdles and everything from, you know, the skilled trades right to our frontline workers, right? And so just something to keep everybody advised of. The next couple pieces on the electric trucks, the chip shortage, and the gas car bans. It was interesting because you know, the county this year decided not to buy trucks because we really couldn't find them at an affordable and easy supply. And so it gets into that supply chain issue part of things. The chip shortage article I thought was incredibly interesting because as you go forward, it's only going to become more and more difficult to get vehicles that have the older chips in them, but yet you can buy a Tesla no problem because they make their own high quality chips. And so the vehicles that need the high-end chips, those are easier to get than the ones that need the low-end chips, which is most other vehicles. So that almost in and of itself fuels the EV revolution. Or, you know, if there's no demand for of fossil fuel vehicles, well, you have to look at the electric part of it. And then that gets into the gas car bans, which, that really is, and Councillor Kulkin, I think you sort of said it earlier, no matter what we may want to believe or understand about, the evolution, electric vehicles are coming, and it's gonna be sooner rather than later. One of the big things for me that came out of our EFL roadshow was, I thought, well, sure, 20 years from now. But the reality is, 2030 is 8 years away, and when you roll in those other elements into it of the chip shortage and where things are at now, by 2025, 50% of new vehicle sales in North America are expected to be EV, right? Like the big three are coming out with 30 plus EV models over the course of the next 2 years. The future is here, so to speak.
Well, and one of the interesting things, I've been in some different chat rooms and looking at, for example, the recreational vehicles like the ATVs and stuff like that. Like, you're already seeing side-by-sides and quads that are electric that are in the marketplace. That's one side. The one that's really curious is the marine industry, which I'm very interested in. And what you're starting to see now is you're starting to see a lot of operators already shifting to some of the marine side where they're building their own still fossil fuel systems, because they know that that's a part that has not had a lot of influence yet in the electric market. So there's going to be a separation. We're not going to lose fossil fuels entirely, but there's going to definitely be a separation, and I think we're going to see some interesting positioning that's going to happen yet before this is all said and done. And like 8 years isn't very far away. We're going to start to see that separation happen in about 4, because it's going to be inevitable. So it's very interesting stuff.
For me, where I had a bit of a personal epiphany the other day is, so my son is 10. And so I thought, okay, when you hit 16, is your first vehicle going to be a fossil fuel vehicle or an electric vehicle? And it was just weird, but that just kind of clicked in my head, right? But that, yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, he's going to be in the place. How quiet can my car be instead of how noisy can it be?
They usually sneak out.
Based on the video games he plays, he's going to want noisy.
Just when you said that, I'm thinking of the bicycle, the parts and the bicycle wheels. Like,
Yes.
how are they going to be adapting them to make it sound like a 4-barrel?
Yeah.
But actually, just in line with that, so I know going forward, like you said, with the electric vehicles, we're going to need that infrastructure. But I think even here, what you're going to see is for diesel trucks aren't going anywhere as quickly as what the passenger vehicles are. So we're still going to have, a fairly heavily dependent transport system dependent on diesel for a number of years yet. I would think before the operators can afford to invest in electric vehicles. Now, that being said, I know this summer when I was traveling in the Maritimes, I was really surprised at the number of charging stations. They were everywhere, it seemed like, and in areas I would never have expected. So their infrastructure, particularly in New Brunswick, seemed very strong.
Yeah. Well, and that's the amazing thing. Like when you go on to that the website showing where the charging stations are, like in some areas they're just ubiquitous. They literally are just everywhere, right? And I think one of the interesting policies, because when they got into the policy discussion on that webinar, it was, well, do you set a maximum charging time? So I mean, if you've only got one charging station in a fairly remote area, do you say, look, 2 hours max if there's somebody waiting, right? Because I mean it's just it's a whole complete industrial change.
It's going to be very difficult to get a charging station 250 miles up the Mackenzie River.
Well, the question will be, how many solar panels will you need, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Or maybe they put in a tidal generator
Yeah.
adjacent to the river.
I had a chance to talk to a lady in Whitecourt here. I seen her pull up in the IGA parking lot with the Lincoln, I can't remember what model it was, but it's a hybrid.
Oh, yeah.
And I just asked her how she liked it, and she loved it. She says, it's 500 horsepower and 1 tank of gas a month. And she said her utility bill hasn't really changed. So it is coming.
Well, and gas prices in BC yesterday hit $1.80 a liter.
We're not.
So, yeah. So, anyways, for all of that information and that kind of thing there, and then of course on to what was my favorite one of all was the luxury flying car. I mean, flying cars have always been one of those things. I mean, since the 1950s. I think anybody who's been a fan of aviation, there's always been a myriad of different parts and bits and everything back and forth, but it's incredibly interesting, this one with Aeromobile. I mean, it's a beautiful vehicle, and it's, you know, like who would have thought you would buy a flying car from the Czech Republic, but here we are. So, yeah. Okay, well, that's about
I
it
want
for-
one.
I know, right? Like, I mean, we should bring one in for test rides.
They say you had some.
Yes, and I apologize because I don't know where my questions fit. So I do apologize. These are just kind of more follow-ups.
Yes.
When I was going through some of my notes from previous meetings, there was a question in regards to budget. How does Woodland's budget compare to other municipalities? And that was for a look-see and to information to be brought back. That's yet when we were talking a couple months ago about the budget, and I think,
Yes.
Patricia, you had asked that question, and it was never addressed. So I just wanted to bring it forward again. How do we sit in comparison to other municipalities?
So there is a provincial database. They're called the financially important graphs. Okay, so the FIG graphs, and I'll send the link because through the FIG graphs you can actually compare one municipality to another. Now, I remember exactly what happened because I was going to send that link out to everybody, but when I went onto the website, they had changed it fundamentally to when I had been on it previously, and you could no longer do the side-by-side comparisons.
Okay.
And so that was on my to-do list, so I'm gonna go back and revisit the FIG graphs.
Yeah,
And I'll
so
see
it
what I
isn't
can-
blue
can
sky,
find
but yet
for
it was a
benchmarks.
fault when I'm going through. And the second one was, this is from November 2021, and I'm sure it's on your list somewhere too, Bert. We discussed about an assessment list in regards to tourism. So this might be in conjunction with the Wild, something that they can use or we can use in working with Wild. A look at internal market and what do we need to bring in after that assessment list was created. And that's from November 2021. So these are just kind of things that I just thought, oh, we haven't discussed them, or I missed them, which is very possible.
I will do the follow-up and do the work on the FIG graphs, because as I said, when I was on the website last, their formats changed a bit, but I'll go and I'll revisit.
'Cause
And
I
if I
thought-
can't do it through the FIG graphs, I'll find a way to find some benchmarks for us. And on the tourism asset list, I'll put that on for the work plan updates for the next meeting.
Okay, perfect, because I thought then maybe that would, I don't know if that will complement the electric possibility grid.
Well, and I'm wondering, like, if the committee's amenable, we do have our tourism map, right? And we updated that significantly a couple of years ago. And that's really kind of our main tourism resource, and even in the last Wild Guide. And I guess maybe that's something that I haven't done with this group as well, is we have our Wild Alberta tourism magazine from last year. I don't think I've ever distributed that to everybody here. It normally lives on the Wild website, but with that website, as we've discussed, not being available at the moment, there's maybe some of that other background and stuff that we're missing. So I'll try and find and distribute that map or the Wild Guide, and then kind of through that we can build
Okay.
the asset list. But I mean, ideally, most of our, like, all of our attractions would certainly
Mm-hmm.
be listed on that wild map.
Yeah, so maybe just check the notes. There was a and it was supposed to be a bring back. Then I was thinking of what Dana brought up some time ago when she was a member at large, and we we're having strategic planning about, asset lists and having that available so that when we need a resource, if we're looking at potential possibilities, we can just draw upon it. So I didn't know whether there was an overlap or they're two separate identities. So thank you very much
I'll
for
bring forward
Sorry, Peter.
the map and the guide, and we can do kind of a written out list as well. Is that a fair place to start?
I think so.
And then we can always
Yeah.
look at kind of adding more to it.
Mhm.
And then back to the other asset list part of things. I know, like, are you thinking assets around site selection? Like, what are
Well, that
some
was
of our
kind of part
identified
of the
sites, or what do
discussion.
we?
That was part of the discussion yet when we had those breakout groups and
Mhm.
some time ago. So maybe in my mind, because I am the oldest one here, you said.
I don't believe I said that. I think
I
I said I'm
believe you
the
did.
oldest one.
Just kidding. The oldest serving member. I just had to tease you.
Our most experienced board member. I don't
Yeah, who
believe I
can't
said
remember anything,
oldest.
so she's pulling things together.
Peter's got you beat on hope.
You got me, Leslie.
But anyways, those are just different things when I'm reviewing. I thought I'd just bring up. So thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say I appreciate the reminders. Thank you.
Easy to forget.
I was just gonna say, thank you very much for catching that and bringing that back. So, because that was one of the things that I think could really help council as well. So, but instead of just looking at the whole provincial list, what I would like to bring forward is, for basically the 7 areas that are on our borders, if we can have the list, if we can make a motion to maybe, well, we'll talk about it, but see if we can have those municipalities listed by population and their EDC budget, just so that when council is planning their pre-budget discussions, that they have something that they can easily reference as well and see if our EDC committee is over budget, or maybe we're 400% less than our neighbors, then that puts us at a developmental risk of losing projects to our neighbors. And I think that would be valuable information for council.
I know where I can get the population numbers, and I'm sure I can find the budget stuff, so I think that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Alan?
Sorry, did you call me Bruce?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So, yeah, that's a great idea, Patricia. I'm just wondering if I was prepared to make a motion to accept the Blue Sky as information, but maybe we want to make a motion first to act on Patricia's idea. And if you would allow me, Patricia, I'd ask that we move to request from administration financial information pertaining to our neighboring municipalities with respect to their economic development budget.
Awesome, thanks, Alan.
I will do my best to break out the EDC number as best as I can find it. It should be pretty easy to find what the 92 expenditures are. So 92 is our budget window, and that should be the same across the province for municipalities for the economic development. So.
And I'd just like to add, if I can, if it's I'm not sure if it's an amendment, a friendly amendment to the item put forward, but is this something, I'm not sure of the procedure here, can we have this done each year?
Alan, would you take that as a friendly amendment?
Sure, I'd be happy to add the word annually.
Awesome, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion?
So is that something that would be brought to the committee after the budgets are put together,
Yeah, they'd have to.
which is typically March? So like an April item?
I'll do my best to bring that back to our AcDev committee for the March meeting, and then that way we'll at least have the comparative. Our budget cycle for the county should be, I think you guys will probably have the audits and the assessments April, May, and usually the final budget for May. So it kind of keeps it topical. So I'll do my best to get all of that information back to us for the next meeting.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed?
Okay, and then on to the information items, and just your kind of three standard provincial reports there, of the weekly review, the indicators at a glance, and the labor market notes, just to kind of show the trends and everything on the provincial info. And then they did release the 2019 statement for total income of farm families. So I thought that was an interesting piece to sort of include, and I was gonna write down where it was, but if I remember correctly, I think it was pretty close to the 2018 numbers. I think there was a bit of a drop on dryland farming, but a bit of an increase in 19 around cattle farming. But again, the unfortunate thing is that Stats Canada data kind of lags a little bit, right? So, but that would be the best info that we would have from them at this point on the farm incomes. And then the last part was just that reside program for doctors. And so what was interesting with that announcement is I believe Barhead is on their community list. And that was the only community directly within our region in regards to the doctor recruitment piece and all of that. But there is new provincial money there for physician attraction. And then we've added in the Can-I section, and Patricia, I apologize. I had this in my notes from our last meeting, and I even reviewed the video, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna add a Can-I section. So that's what I did, but I didn't really populate it with much because I wasn't quite sure what to put in. So we have the Can-I section.
Just a quick point of order first. For the blue sky discussion, was there a motion to accept these items as information?
Oh,
No, there wasn't.
Was not.
That was my question too.
Oh,
Okay, so then I'll make a motion for the blue sky discussion to accept these items as information.
okay. Any questions? Call the question, all in favor?
thank you.
Accepted.
Just to answer Bert's question about the Can-I section, all I was thinking of is just basically in the format of the way you have your RFDs set out. I think is what it was. Bear with me 1 second. Or no, I think that was when we spoke about it, it was an agenda item. So just with Blue Sky, that was opening up just new discussions and adding a constant, never-ending improvement section. That was Can-I, constant and never-ending improvement. Just something to lead us back in every meeting. Is there, one item that we can put there that we're doing something or changing something, or, just with maybe nothing needs to change, but just as an idea of asking the question, is there something in our process that we can improve? So.
Thank you very much. So we want that added as a new section to the agenda. So we would end up going back to our main page and adding it in. I'm thinking it would probably be, that would probably become 10, and then in committee would probably move to 11, something like that.
Peter?
Yeah, I was, my Sunday morning reading was was very interesting. That's because I was interested in that off-farm income, which is really, really interesting, because if you start to cut through all of the different, it shows you just how much off-farm income is contributed to the operations of agriculture and how that subsidizes our food industry. And I just found it really interesting that it only rose 1% despite that the costs on farms went up about 13, I think it was 13%, which isn't indicated in any of this stuff. So really just interesting information for the ag side. I guess the other part that I would like to, is this, can we have a notice of motion in this portion? Or for Bert for next?
Sure.
I would just like to file a notice of motion that we have a look at the discussion that was had between the school divisions and like I'm a liaison on the school board, and Joan was in on that meeting. It would be just interesting to have that information come to the economic development, because the discussion centered around revitalizing, I guess, our rural schools, because that's a big economic driver down the road. So I would like to see that brought to the table here, if that's possible, Bert.
Yeah, what I can do, I know Heather had sent me the information from Pembina Hills, and I did go back and review it, and I think the telling part of it that I thought was interesting. Just give me 1 second, I'm just scrolling through to find it. But the enrollment numbers in the Pembina Hill schools, there it is. Sorry, I just have to make my print a little bit bigger on my screen here. Yeah, I think we can share this, as long as it's a public document. I'm sure that we can share it. I know because it wasn't a meeting that I was on, I didn't have it on my economic development list. But the good news is, so Pembina Hills operates the school in Fort Assiniboine. So the Fort Assiniboine school, their total numbers based on what their enrollment and everything is this year. So we have 94 students enrolled at the Fort Assiniboine school in total. And then that goes through from, I'm going to say, it looks like it's grades 1 to 9. Does that sound
Yep.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so your class sizes vary in range from as little as 3 to as high as 17, 18. And this might be part of the reason why we're looking at the increased childcare demand. We've got 17 kids in early learning, 18 kids in grade 1, 12 in grade 2. So there's definitely that echo on the population for kids at that level. So that would be what, your 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, right?
How many
So,
in the early learning?
early learning, I lost my line, there we go. So early learning is 17, grade 1 was 18, grade 2 was 12, and then grade 3 we dropped to 4.
So would the homeschooled ones be included in that, Bert?
No, this would just be the Pembina Hills School enrollment, and
Okay.
I'll defer to our former teacher to help me out,
Yeah,
back me up.
it's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a
You're
moment,
correct.
Please,
Homeschooling, sorry?
my battery died out here, so I need a charger, so can we take a 5-minute break?
Sure, we can, I'll do my best to pause our stream.
Just need to get my charger.
Yes.
Oh, out here, I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
Mine's on the verge.
As we'll take advantage of the break.
I believe we're paused. So I'll just say, I believe we're paused.
It's all right if our public understands our technical difficulties.
Well, I'll just say all economic development officers have deficiencies.
Well, one of the things that was interesting, Bert, is that we have a superintendent in Barhead that's really open to having a look at developing a communication link between municipalities on several different levels. And if we can get those conversations started, it's a good possibility we can get some of the educational curriculum developed that goes into the urban centers as well.
Yeah.
That's, to me, probably
Well-
a big piece of it.
See, and so we were having this conversation, and where we've kind of lost our touches with Pembina Hills is Pembina Hills used to do a career expo in Barhead, as we do, and we used to be part of that. So we had a touch there every year with Pembina Hills. They're not doing it right now because of COVID. Pembina Hills also used to be part of the RITA,
Yep.
and they're not right now. And so we don't have that point of contact there. So that explains why, because we were kind of going through it, and it's like, well, yeah, if it feels like we haven't been around their table,
Right.
that's probably why, right?
Well, and what I didn't realize as well was that Dave Truckee was originally one of the ones that pushed the school divisions to be involved in RITA.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to revisit that.
I think that as we rebuild the RITA, I think that that would be wonderful to have the schools at the table.
See, I had no knowledge of that, until yesterday. So it was awesome. What's that?
You know,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I think we've got, we need to get the RITA through the next couple of years. And
Yeah.
then
yeah.
then there's gonna be that opportunity, but COVID has just decimated so much, right?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, and I think it's no different. A lot of the, I guess, if you have a strong administration at the RITA level, then that coordination happens. And I think we lost that, and now we just have to rebuild that.
Well, it's, the decline has been unfortunate, but part of it happened too from, like we lost one community due to
Yep.
the community being dissolved.
Yep.
We lost another community due to, they just simply didn't have the manpower. I just pressed pause. Did that?
It is still streaming.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Wasn't sure if I would do that. We're just about ready to come back from our short recess.
Okay.
I think.
Just,
No, we're almost there. We've got, do you think we've got one more item, or is our committee as a whole, is that next? That's next. But we had to take a quick break because of the charging.
See, if we had that grant, we could have charged your electric laptop there. So many things to think about. Information.
just apologize.
I've got a big bad headache.
So you need water or something?
No,
Geez, you got an echo going there now.
So you have to turn
Yeah,
off
turn
the
my
mic
speaker
on
off.
your Teams.
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Bruce, if you turn off the mic on your teams?
Because Teams is connected here, it's connected.
Better? No, my mic. I've got it.
Very godlike.
Won't be a good time to click a pen.
Thank you. But yeah, because I can't upload it directly, but she probably can. Thank you, sir.
Maybe.
Just get that mic up there. Yeah, so, press it again. Now you're muted and
Yeah.
echo, so.
That's better.
Thank you, Nikita.
These things.
So it's good to know that our technical support is never far away.
Yeah.
So he was watching us, and he's like, you guys are still streaming. So he came down to let us know. I turned off the video. So that being said, our next item then,
They didn't,
when we're ready to reconvene.
I think we need a motion on information items.
I'll make a motion to accept the information items as information.
Any discussion? Call a question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is passed. Now we have to go in committee. Do we stop the streaming?
Yeah, we will, we just need the motion first, so 11:18, who would like to make our motion?
I can make a motion that we move into committee for those, is that item 11?
Yeah, that's perfect, thank you. And